You ever have someone in your life who just doesn't like you, yet you can't point to a single thing you did wrong? You barely know them, you haven't crossed a line, and still, you can feel it. The tone is colder. The distance feels intentional. And, almost without noticing, it starts to work on your mind. You replay conversations. You soften your words. You wonder what you should fix. People often tell you the same thing. Ignore it. Be extra kind. Give it time, and they'll warm up. But that advice misunderstands what's really happening. When someone dislikes you for no clear reason, there is a reason, just not one that belongs to you. Stoic philosophy has long warned about this trap. The danger isn't another person's reaction. It's the moment you allow their reaction to become a measure of your worth. When someone feels unsettled by who you are, your composure, your confidence, your progress, they rarely confront that discomfort directly. Instead, it leaks out as distance, dismissal, or quiet resistance. And, because these responses are subtle, they invite self-doubt. You start negotiating with yourself for peace, changing what never needed changing. This video isn't here to help you be more likable, agreeable, or careful. Stoicism doesn't ask you to shrink so others can feel comfortable. It teaches you how to see patterns clearly without personalizing them, and how to remain steady when others project their inner unrest onto you. There are 5 behaviors that people who resent you without reason almost always repeat. Once you recognize them, the confusion lifts. You stop overthinking, you stop chasing warmth, and you return authority to where it belongs, inside yourself. And before we begin, take a moment to ground yourself. If this message resonates, leave a simple reminder in the comments. Inner order first. And if you're choosing clarity over reaction, like this video, share it with someone who needs steadiness, and subscribe to Stoic Path so we can continue this path together. Now, let's begin. Sign number 1, selective coldness. One of the earliest and most confusing signs appears quietly, almost politely. You notice that this person is warm, relaxed, even charming with others. They laugh easily. They engage. Their tone is open. But the moment you enter the space, something shifts. The smile fades. The conversation thins out. They grow distant, distracted, or suddenly find a reason to leave. Nothing hostile is said. Nothing obvious happens. And yet the contrast is unmistakable. This is not a bad day. This is not social anxiety. This is selective coldness, and it is rarely accidental. At first, your mind tries to normalize it. You tell yourself they're tired. Maybe you misread the moment. Maybe it's your imagination. But when the pattern repeats again and again, across different settings, you begin to feel it in your body. A tightening, a subtle self-monitoring. You become more careful with your words, less spontaneous with your presence. This is where the real cost begins. Not in their behavior, but in how it starts to rearrange you. Stoicism teaches that our peace is threatened not by events themselves, but by the judgments we attach to them. Selective coldness is powerful because it invites a judgment. I must be the problem. But look closer. When someone is capable of warmth, yet withholds it only from you, the behavior is intentional, even if it is not conscious. Warmth is a form of acknowledgement. It says, I accept your presence. Withholding it is a quiet refusal. For someone who feels inwardly unstable, acceptance can feel like surrender. If your confidence, your composure, or even your authenticity unsettles them, distance becomes a defense. They create emotional space not because you are dangerous, but because something about you threatens the story they tell themselves about who they are. From a Stoic lens, this is not a moral failure on their part. It is a symptom of inner disorder. People who are at ease with themselves do not need to regulate others through subtle exclusion. They do not ration warmth. They do not measure belonging. When someone does, it reveals a scarcity mindset rooted in insecurity. Your presence becomes a mirror, and rather than face what they see, they turn away. The coldness is not designed to punish you. It is designed to protect them. The danger is not that they withhold warmth. The danger is that you start chasing it. You become quieter, more agreeable, more accommodating, hoping to restore what was never freely given. Stoicism warns against this impulse. Approval is external. It sits outside your control. The moment you adjust your inner posture to earn it, you hand over authority that does not belong to them. As Epictetus observed, when we desire what is not ours to command, we place ourselves in quiet bondage. Selective coldness works only when you believe their warmth is something you need to function. A Stoic response is not confrontation. It is not withdrawal in bitterness. It is internal realignment. You acknowledge the pattern without dramatizing it. You stop narrating their behavior as evidence about your worth. You allow them their distance without filling it with explanations, apologies, or emotional labor. This is not indifference in the shallow sense. It is clarity. You remain civil. You remain steady. But you no longer lean forward emotionally to compensate for their retreat. You stand where you are. There is a subtle dignity in this posture. When you stop chasing warmth, you stop feeding the dynamic that sustains it. You are no longer participating in a silent negotiation for acceptance. You recognize that not all distance is meant to be crossed, and not all coldness is yours to solve. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts remain ordered, external chill cannot freeze your inner climate. The warning here is simple but important. If you continue to interpret selective coldness as a call to self-correction, you will slowly abandon parts of yourself that were never the problem. You will confuse adaptability with self-erasure. Stoicism does not ask you to be rigid, but it does ask you to be rooted. When you are rooted, the withdrawal of warmth loses its leverage. You stop reacting, you stop adjusting, and in that stillness, something shifts. Not in them, but in you. Selective coldness is not a verdict on your character. It is a signal. See it clearly, without resentment or fear. Then let it pass without rearranging your inner order. This is the first test, and it is where the Stoic path begins. Sign number 2, avoiding eye contact. Before you notice the behavior, understand the mechanism. Eye contact is not just social habit, it is psychological acknowledgement. To look at someone is to recognize their presence, their legitimacy, their place in the room. On a subconscious level, sustained eye contact says, "I see you, and I accept that you exist here." When someone consistently avoids your eyes while freely offering attention to others, they are not being distracted or shy. They are withdrawing recognition. For a person who feels threatened, acknowledgement feels like loss of ground. Looking at you would mean granting you equality, and in their inner calculus, that feels unsafe. So they look away, not because you are invisible, but because you are seen too clearly. This often shows up in group settings. You're speaking, and their gaze drifts to their phone, the table, the window, anywhere but you. When others speak, their eyes return. The contrast is subtle, but your nervous system notices it immediately. You may feel dismissed, unimportant, or strangely unsettled, even if you can't explain why. That reaction is human. Our brains evolved to read attention as belonging. Stoicism does not deny this instinct. It teaches us not to be ruled by it. The recognition phase is simple, once you know what to look for. This is not occasional distraction. It is patterned avoidance. It repeats across moments and contexts. You begin to realize that the lack of eye contact is selective, not random. And once you see that, the internal questions start creeping in. Am I saying something wrong? Am I boring? Should I stop talking? This is where the behavior becomes costly, not because of what they are doing, but because of what it invites you to do to yourself. You begin to shrink your presence to reduce discomfort that was never yours to manage. From a Stoic perspective, this is where judgment quietly replaces reality. The behavior itself is external. It sits outside your control. But the meaning you assign to it, I am being disrespected, therefore I am lesser, that is internal. And it is optional. Marcus Aurelius warned that we are harmed not by others' actions, but by our opinions about those actions. Avoided eye contact feels personal because we interpret it as a verdict. In truth, it is a reflection of the other person's inner state. Someone at peace with themselves does not fear acknowledgement. They do not ration attention. They do not guard eye contact as if it were power. The deeper cost appears over time. When this pattern repeats, you may find yourself speaking less, offering fewer ideas, or mentally checking out of interactions altogether. Not out of confidence, but out of quiet self-protection. You begin to associate visibility with discomfort. This is how external disorder starts shaping internal posture. Stoicism draws a firm line here. Your worth does not rise or fall with another person's willingness to look at you. Attention is not a currency you need to earn. The Stoic response is neither confrontation nor withdrawal. It is steadiness. You continue to speak clearly when you choose to speak. You maintain your own eye contact with calm, not challenge. And if it is not returned, you do not chase it. You do not lean forward emotionally to pull recognition from someone who has decided to withhold it. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment we stop demanding from others what they cannot give without betraying themselves. If someone cannot offer basic acknowledgement without feeling threatened, that limitation belongs to them. This posture does something important internally. It restores alignment. You stop scanning the room for validation. You stop measuring your presence by another person's gaze. Instead, you anchor yourself in what is within your control. Your tone, your clarity, your conduct. The absence of eye contact no longer destabilizes you because it no longer defines you. In this way, Stoicism does not harden you. It recenters you. There is also a quiet warning here. If you continue to interpret avoided eye contact as a cue to disappear, you slowly train yourself to equate peace with invisibility. That is not Stoic calm, that is retreat. True calm allows you to remain present without demanding acceptance. When you stand rooted in that distinction, the behavior loses its emotional leverage. You notice it, you name it internally, and you let it pass without reaction. So pause for a moment and reflect. Have you noticed these first two signs, selective coldness and avoided eye contact, showing up together in your own life? If these insights brought clarity, leave a simple note in the comments, inner order, and stay with Stoic path, because the next sign reveals how this dynamic moves from quiet avoidance into something far more subtle and far more damaging if left unseen. Sign number 3. Social invalidation. The third sign often feels the most disorienting because it happens in plain sight while remaining easy to deny. You contribute an idea in a meeting, a conversation, or a group setting. It's clear, it's relevant. Sometimes it even solves the problem at hand, and yet it passes through the room without acknowledgement. No response, no follow-up, no reaction. A few minutes later, someone else says nearly the same thing, and suddenly the energy shifts. Heads nod, credit is given. The idea is praised, just no longer attached to you. This is not coincidence. This is social invalidation. At first, you try to be generous in your interpretation. Maybe they didn't hear you. Maybe the timing was off. Maybe it just wasn't the right moment. But when the pattern repeats with the same person or in the same environment, something inside you tightens. You begin to hesitate before speaking. You start editing yourself in real time. You wonder if your contributions actually matter. This is how invalidation does its quiet work. It doesn't attack you directly. It erodes your confidence by omission. From a Stoic perspective, this behavior is not about the quality of your ideas. It is about control of status. Acknowledging someone publicly gives them social weight. For a person who feels threatened, granting you that weight feels dangerous. If they cannot diminish your competence directly, they attempt to erase its visibility. By ignoring your words, speaking over you, or redirecting attention, they preserve their sense of superiority without open conflict. The aim is not dialogue. It is hierarchy. The immediate cost is internal. You begin to doubt your clarity. You question your intelligence. You pull back, not because you lack insight, but because participation starts to feel unsafe. Stoicism is precise here. When we allow others to dictate whether our voice has value, we surrender something essential. Epictetus warned that no one can truly silence you without your cooperation. Yet social invalidation works because it invites that cooperation subtly. You silence yourself to avoid discomfort that someone else created. There is also a deeper danger. Over time, repeated invalidation can distort your relationship with effort. You may start withholding ideas, not out of wisdom, but out of learned futility. This is how environments lose truth. Not because truth disappears, but because it stops being spoken. Stoicism does not ask you to speak endlessly or fight for attention. It asks you to remain aligned with your own integrity. Whether your words are received or ignored does not change their truth. The Stoic response here is grounded and restrained. You do not chase recognition. You do not demand credit. And you do not grow bitter. You continue to speak when it is appropriate and remain silent when silence serves you. The difference is internal. You no longer measure the worth of your contribution by the room's reaction. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to act according to reason, not applause. The value of a rational action is complete the moment it is performed. Recognition is optional. This posture restores power quietly. When you are no longer seeking validation, invalidation loses its effect. You stop reacting emotionally to being overlooked. You observe the pattern without internalizing it. And if the environment consistently refuses to acknowledge truth, unless it comes from certain mouths, you gain clarity about the environment itself. Stoicism teaches discernment, not endurance for its own sake. You are allowed to notice when a space is misaligned with your values. The warning here is subtle but essential. If you begin to equate invisibility with humility, you will mistake suppression for virtue. Stoic humility is not self-erasure. It is self-respect without noise. When you continue to show up honestly, without attachment to recognition, you preserve your inner order regardless of how others behave. You are not diminished by being ignored. You are diminished only when you begin to believe that silence imposed from outside should become silence imposed from within. Social invalidation reveals more about insecurity than disagreement. Those who are confident in their position do not fear giving credit. They do not need to erase others to remain standing. When you see this sign clearly, you stop personalizing it. You understand that your task is not to be heard at all costs, but to remain true at all times. That distinction is where Stoic strength lives. Sign number 4. Quiet reputation damage. Imagine this. You're getting along well with a group. Nothing dramatic. No open conflict. Then, one day, a friend pulls you aside and says something casually, almost apologetically. I don't know. Someone mentioned you're nice, but a little intense. Nothing bad. Just something feels off. There's no accusation. No direct quote. Just a vague unease that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. You replay your behavior, searching for the moment you crossed an invisible line. But you can't find it because it never existed. This is how quiet reputation damage begins, not with confrontation, but with suggestion. The recognition phase often arrives late. You don't hear the original words. You only feel their after effects. People grow slightly more distant. Invitations change. Conversations feel cautious. And when you ask directly, there's nothing to point to. No proof, no evidence, just impressions. This is not accidental. When someone dislikes you without reason, but lacks the courage or justification to confront you openly, they often choose the safest route. They reshape how others perceive you. The mechanism is subtle and social. Direct conflict carries risk. It invites scrutiny. But vague commentary spreads easily and protects the speaker. A phrase like, "I can't explain it," but something feels off, sounds reasonable, even intuitive. It plants doubt without responsibility. Stoicism teaches us to watch not only what is said, but how it functions. In this case, the function is isolation. By introducing uncertainty around your character, they reduce your social standing without appearing hostile. It is a quiet way to control the narrative when they cannot control you. The cost of this behavior is uniquely painful because it attacks something we cannot directly defend: our reputation in the minds of others. You may feel misunderstood, exposed, or falsely framed, and because the criticism is indirect, you may feel compelled to overcorrect, explaining yourself more, softening your edges, or trying to appear more agreeable. This is where inner order begins to erode. Stoicism reminds us that reputation is an external. It belongs to others, not to us. But that does not mean its impact is imaginary. It means we must respond without surrendering ourselves to it. A Stoic response does not involve chasing rumors or confronting shadows. You do not demand to know who said what. You do not attempt to repair every misunderstanding. Instead, you return to what is fully within your control: your character, your consistency, your conduct over time. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best defense is not retaliation, but becoming the kind of person that false impressions cannot sustain themselves against. Quiet damage dissolves slowly when it is met with steady integrity. There is also an important boundary here. Stoicism is not passive endurance of unhealthy environments. If you recognize that a space thrives on insinuation rather than honesty, clarity replaces confusion. You understand that the discomfort you feel is not a sign to try harder, but a signal to step back emotionally. You remain polite. You remain composed. But you no longer offer intimacy where distortion is rewarded. This is not withdrawal in fear. It is withdrawal in self-respect. The warning is clear. If you try to manage every perception, you will lose yourself in the process. You will begin living defensively, shaping your identity around imagined judgments. Stoicism asks something braver. It asks you to let your life speak longer than gossip ever can. When you stop feeding the rumor cycle with anxiety and explanation, it weakens. Not always immediately, but reliably. Pause and reflect for a moment. Have you ever sensed this kind of quiet reputation damage unfolding around you without a clear source or accusation? If so, you are not alone. Stay with this video because the fifth sign is the most common and the one you are almost guaranteed to encounter at some point in your life. Sign number 5. Resentment toward your success. This final sign is often the most revealing because it surfaces at a moment that should be simple and shared. You reach a milestone. You receive recognition. You solve a problem that has weighed on you for a long time. You share the news without arrogance, just relief or quiet pride. Most people respond naturally with encouragement, curiosity, or genuine congratulations. But one person reacts differently. Their smile tightens. Their words feel rehearsed, or worse, they change the subject altogether. You sense it immediately. your success has made them uncomfortable. At first, you may try to minimize the moment. You downplay your achievement, soften your tone, or rush past the topic so no one feels awkward. This instinct comes from empathy, but it carries a cost. When someone consistently struggles to celebrate your progress, it is not humility to make yourself smaller. It is self-abandonment. Stoicism teaches us to observe reactions without absorbing them. A reaction that turns cold in the presence of your growth is not feedback. It is projection. The mechanism behind success, resentment, is simple but powerful. For someone who measures life as a comparison, your advancement feels like evidence of their stagnation. Your happiness highlights what they have not yet resolved within themselves. Instead of using that discomfort as motivation, they externalize it. They reinterpret your progress as a threat. In their inner narrative, acknowledgement of your success would require confronting their own dissatisfaction, so they resist it by minimizing, deflecting, or quietly resenting what you represent. The recognition phase becomes clear over time. It is not one awkward response, but a pattern. They are enthusiastic about the achievements of others, but reserved with yours. They offer praise that feels conditional or dismissive. Comments like, "That's great, but anyone could do that," or "It's not really a big deal, is it?" begin to appear. These are not neutral observations. They are attempts to restore emotional balance by reducing the weight of your accomplishment. The cost of this dynamic can be profound. You may start hiding good news. You stop sharing progress. You celebrate alone to avoid discomfort. Over time, this creates a quiet fracture between who you are becoming and who you allow yourself to be around others. Stoicism cautions against this retreat. Your growth is not an offense. Your success does not require permission. When you suppress it to protect another person's fragile equilibrium, you place their unresolved struggle above your own development. The Stoic response is firm, yet calm. You do not boast. You do not seek validation, and you do not apologize for progress. You allow your success to exist without justification. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that envy arises not from the excellence of others, but from the insecurity of the observer. Your task is not to manage that insecurity. Your task is to continue acting in accordance with reason and virtue. Recognition may or may not follow. The action itself remains complete. This posture restores balance internally. When you stop filtering your achievements through the emotional comfort of others, you reclaim ownership of your path. You remain gracious, but you stop explaining. You remain open, but you stop shrinking. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. Stoicism does not equate humility with invisibility. It defines humility as freedom from the need to dominate or diminish. You are allowed to succeed quietly and fully at the same time. There is also a warning embedded in this sign. If you repeatedly tolerate resentment in the presence of your growth, you will begin associating success with isolation or guilt. That association can stall progress more effectively than failure ever could. Stoicism asks you to notice this early. When someone cannot meet your joy without discomfort, it reveals a limit in the relationship, not a flaw in your achievement. Respect that limit without hostility. Resentment toward your success is the clearest indication that the dislike you sensed was never about your behavior. It was about what you embody. When you recognize this, the confusion dissolves. You stop asking why they feel the way they do. You stop adjusting your life to keep them comfortable. And in that clarity, something settles. You are no longer bound to their reactions. Your peace was never waiting on their approval. It was built the moment you chose inner order over emotional negotiation. When you step back and look at all 5 signs together, a single pattern becomes clear. The coldness, the avoidance, the dismissal, The quiet damage to your reputation and the discomfort around your success are not separate behaviors. They are different expressions of the same inner condition. Stoicism teaches that people act not from reason when they feel threatened, but from unrest. And unrest always seeks an external object to blame. That object, in this case, happened to be you. At no point in these patterns is there evidence of wrongdoing on your part. What appears instead is a consistent attempt to regulate discomfort by controlling distance, attention, and perception. When someone lacks inner stability, they become sensitive to reminders of what they have not resolved within themselves. Your presence, your clarity, or your progress can quietly expose that gap. Rather than confront it, they redirect the tension outward. This is not malice in the dramatic sense. It is avoidance in psychological form. Stoic philosophy draws a sharp distinction between what belongs to us and what does not. Your character, your choices, and your conduct belong to you. Their reactions, judgments, and projections do not. The mistake that creates suffering is crossing that boundary. When you internalize another person's unrest, you begin managing a problem that was never yours. Marcus Aurelius warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. These signs feel personal only because the mind tries to assign meaning where none is required. What restores order is not confrontation or explanation, but clarity. Clarity allows you to see behavior without attaching your identity to it. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and begin asking, "What does this reveal about their inner state?" That shift alone returns authority to where it belongs. You no longer negotiate for warmth, attention, or validation. You allow others to carry what is theirs without carrying it for them. This is the Stoic turning point. When you recognize that the pattern was never about you, the emotional charge dissolves. Not because the behavior changes, but because your relationship to it does. You become less reactive, less self-correcting, less entangled. You act from inner alignment rather than external approval. And in that space, something quiet but decisive happens. You reclaim your peace not by hardening yourself, but by ordering yourself. Once you see the pattern clearly, the question is no longer why they behave this way. The Stoic question becomes, how do I move forward without surrendering my inner order? Stoicism does not ask you to fix people, expose them, or correct their behavior. It asks you to respond in a way that preserves clarity, dignity, and self-command. The response is quiet, but it is decisive. The first Stoic response is to stop negotiating for acceptance. When you recognize that someone's behavior is rooted in insecurity rather than misunderstanding, trying harder becomes unnecessary. You do not need to explain yourself more clearly, soften your personality, or prove your intentions. Epictetus taught that when we desire the approval of those who are not at peace with themselves, we place our peace at risk. Acceptance freely given is meaningful. Acceptance extracted through effort is a trap. Release the need to be understood by those who have already chosen misinterpretation. The second response is to remove personalization from projection. Their coldness, dismissal, or resentment feels directed at you, but it is not caused by you. Stoicism trains the mind to separate stimulus from judgment. You observe the behavior as information, not as a verdict. This does not make you indifferent to reality. It makes you accurate about it. When you stop internalizing what was never yours to carry, emotional reactions lose their grip. You remain aware without becoming entangled. The third response is to remain rooted in who you are, without shrinking or performing. You continue to speak with clarity. You continue to work with integrity. You allow success to arrive without apology. Stoicism does not equate restraint with disappearance. It teaches steadiness. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul should stand upright, not be held upright by others. When you change yourself to reduce someone else's discomfort, you abandon that uprightness. When you remain aligned, their discomfort remains where it belongs. Together, these responses form a single Stoic posture. Withdraw emotional access, not dignity. You do not escalate. You do not explain endlessly. You do not retaliate. You simply stop offering inner access to those who misuse it. This is not punishment. It is boundary. And boundaries, in Stoicism, are not walls. They are lines of responsibility. You are responsible for your conduct. Others are responsible for theirs. When practiced consistently, this response produces a quiet freedom. You stop monitoring reactions. You stop editing yourself. You move through spaces with less tension and more clarity. Whether others warm up or remain distant becomes irrelevant to your inner climate. You have returned authority to its rightful place. This is how Stoicism protects you, not by changing the world around you, but by stabilizing the world within you. As you reach the end of this reflection, it helps to pause and notice what has shifted, not in the behavior of others, but in the way you now see it. The coldness, the avoidance, the quiet dismissal, the subtle damage to reputation, and the discomfort around your success were never random. They followed a pattern. And once a pattern is understood, it no longer has the same power over the mind. Stoicism does not promise that people will treat you more fairly. It promises something more reliable, that their behavior will no longer disturb your inner order. When you stop trying to decode every reaction and stop correcting yourself to earn peace, something steadies inside you. You realize that not every distance is a rejection, and not every discomfort is yours to solve. This is where Stoic strength becomes visible, not through dominance or withdrawal, but through quiet alignment. You remain courteous without overextending. You remain present without seeking validation. You allow others to reveal themselves without making their inner unrest your responsibility. In doing so, you step out of emotional negotiation and back into self-command. That is not indifference. It is maturity. Remember this simple truth as you move forward. Not every cold reaction is a message. Some are reflections. When you hold to that line, confusion gives way to clarity. You no longer chase warmth, attention, or approval. You preserve your energy for what is real, deliberate, and within your control. Before you leave, take a moment to reflect. Which of these signs felt most familiar to you? And which response are you learning to practice right now? If this message brought you clarity, leave a quiet reminder in the comments. Inner order first. Like this video if you're choosing calm over reaction. Share it with someone who may need steadiness today. And subscribe to Stoic Path if you're walking this path of clarity and self-respect with us. We'll meet again unhurried, grounded, and intact.